People who quit their jobs on the spot. What happened? At last minute. Owner, manager, CEO, dictator revoke my Christmas leave. My wife was terminally ill. Daughter was about to move off to college. And it would be our last Christmas together. Ever again. It's the only time in my life I've ever said, fuck you, to a boss's face. Had a verbal agreement with my manager that she'd reduce my hours so I could continue working. During the school year, she put me on for 40 hours per week on the first school time schedule. I spoke to her about it and reminded her of her word. She stonewalled and denied everything. I apologized and walked out of her office. I graduated and got a good job writing software. 30 years later, Kmart no longer exists. Fuck you, Beth. I was working for a major video game company back in 2003. We were in crunch time. Working from 7 o'clock to 2 a.m. 6 days a week. Right before lunch, our supervisor walks in and says, "Good news, everyone. We get to come in on Sundays now. But it's only a half day." Quote, the moment he was done with his speech, I walked over to his desk and told him I was quitting immediately. He warned me that I would never work in the game industry again. I didn't give a proper 2 weeks. I told him that was fine and finished my day. I ended up working in the industry for another 3 years until I freaked out and quit for good. Never again. I got told I wouldn't be getting a raise because I asked for the raise. But apparently if I hadn't asked I would have gotten it. My boss then said I was on the shit east of the higher boss for asking, and that I wouldn't get a raise for at least a few months. Yeah, I quit right there, lol. Dumbasses were exploding acetylene gas for yucks and the owner of the company thought it was cool. I quit on the spot. Addendum. The owner of the company was given it by his dad on his 18th birthday. And his dad took the company back after a few months. Had a supervisor who was really unprofessional and disrespectful. When I turned in my 2 weeks, I also left a personal note for my manager telling them exactly why I was quitting. And that I refused to work anymore. Shifts with the supervisor during my exit period. First week was fine. But I walked in one day and there was supervisor. Gave them a chance but they quickly pulled some crap. So I walked out and skipped my remaining shifts. No spectacle. But I'm still proud that I stood up for myself. Head mechanic at a small but busy bicycle shop. Been there 5 years or so with no raises other than promised. Soon. Owner showed up with a nice new car and started the same old spell about there not being enough money to offer a raise of any sort. Told him to get fucked, walked out and down to the main competitor down the road. Better pay and better place to work. Once word got out I was there, a lot of the clientele followed me there. Old place was out of business in 9 mths or so. Newly in the field in my own early 20s and no prior experience being up high on ladders. Believe it was my 3rd day out. Cable install tech. Got to the site and it was a mid-span drop, meaning along the wire on the pole. Midway between poles. And right in the way were trees and bushes, making it next to impossible for me to get the ladder correctly positioned. I tried for a good while and then called dispatch. They complained about my complaint. And basically told me to suck it up and figure it out. So I tried again. Getting the ladder hooked but nearly vertical. I got the best angle I could on it and climbed up. Couple of rungs but the ladder tipped back. A few more repositions later and now we have the ladder against a tree but there's limbs and bushes poking through the rungs. I start to climb and maybe 4 or 5 rungs up the hole. Ladder shifts sideways and I nearly went tumbling. Called dispatch and they more or less told I was to stay there until I had the job done. So instead I packed everything up, told the customer I couldn't help them, and went back to the warehouse. Dropped all the equipment and cable boxes and such that I had, and left. Didn't even say a word to anyone there. I've done it twice. First time, district manager at Applebee's decided that my request off for a school competition that I had put in months earlier and had been approved already was just not gonna work anymore, and changed the schedule without telling me. I didn't come in because I didn't know. Then, like 2 months later, my mom called in for me because I was projectile puking from flu or food poisoning, and he yelled at her. As soon as I could walk without barfing, I took my uniform in, handed it to him, and left. Second time, I was working at a daycare while looking for work as a teacher. The daycare charged by the hour, so they only got money if the kids were there. They wouldn't call parents if the kids were sick or had fevers. One day, I was left in a room by myself with 9 infants. No break. Not only is that illegal, it is super dangerous. I called her after relief showed up and quit. I worked for a photographer, and we were on a tight deadline schedule. Most of the office had been let go for the summer, so it was just me, the head of my department, one coworker, and the owner. I come in to discover the owner left town with his family on vacation. I hit my breaking point. I put my letter of resignation on his desk while he was gone. My only coworker left with me. The owner had no idea what had happened until he returned home to the letter. Undone work on the counter. And 0 employees. My boss had me riding in the same vehicle as someone he knew had a high infectious illness, and it was our job to go into homes of both infants and elderly people. My manager was intentionally trying to sabotage me and write me up for BS things because I challenged her at times. I was the assistant manager. Didn't want to get fired, so I just told her I'm done and walked out. I already had another job lined up, so when I got pushback from my district manager about my almost 3-week notice, I just handed over my store keys and left. This job I worked at years ago had a habit of telling people, "Oh, there's no work ATM, have a few days off and we'll let you know when to come back," then just never call people back, because they didn't want to have to actually fire the person. They did it to me after a job got messed up when I was following my supervisor's directions. I asked him multiple times, "Are you sure? Thing we don't want will likely happen if we do it," and he kept telling me to. Then when the customer complained, he suddenly blamed it on me. The next day they pulled the "hey, there's no work right now" thing. Except they did actually call me back the next week when they realized nobody else knew how to do my job and they were floundering. I came into my office to find it a mess. And this guy the first got along with came in and was surprised to see me there. Told me how management said they let me go and had him doing my job, but he had no idea what to do. I was pretty pissed then. So I walked to the office, handed over my high-vis vest and walked out. The manager was being really arrogant. Then about 5 minutes later, as I was driving away, she realized they still had nobody who knew how to do my job and started spam calling me. When I wouldn't answer, she started texting me begging me to call her back to work this out. Fuck that place. Never went back. Also about 6 months later that manager was fired. A year after that the company was bought out. I was told when I was hired that I would be on probation for a year and then I would get full benefits. I made it clear when they hired me that I had a 2-week honeymoon I was going on and gave them the dates I would be gone. I worked that job for 9 months, and then when my honeymoon came around they informed me that 2 straight weeks off wasn't possible and that they had to fire me and rehire me, and then I'd be on probation and earning less without full benefits for another year. I walked into back offices where the assistant managers and the general manager were and started yelling. The general manager started yelling back at me that they weren't going to change the rules for me. I had performance review at 6 months into the job and I got an excellent review. I yelled at the dude and threatened to sue him. Then I told him how small he was. He was 6'7" in height, but I meant as a person. I told him he could shove the job up his ass and walked out. I don't regret it.